Mooted. My point is mooted. Okay. So the biggest problem I have with people is they didn't get outside information. If you did not mention the big issues of the ratification battle, which was the whole issue of the statement, if you did not mention the groups that made up the Senate, the disagreements of like the reservations, if you did not mention the irreconcilable, or those loyal Democrats who were supporters of Wilson, if you didn't have those groups, that's a big deal. You're not going to get an A for sure. You really have to do well on the rest of it to do well. Unless you really talk about the liberals and conservatives. I had some people not even mention liberals and conservatives. And that was in the statement. I had some people not even mention Article 10, which was the whole root of the argument in the League of Nations that was part of the Treaty of Versailles. That's when I take points off. So it has to be more than just simply writing what's in the documents. And there's still a few people who put down quotes. Any yahoo can copy. You are not yahoos by definition. And I miss the squirrel. When they took down the bushes, you get a squirrel that used to run back and forth. But you're not as interested in squirrels. I thought you would be. So that. So maybe one time you can use 5 words, but you want to write what's in the document and relate it to something you know, outside information, but then connect it to your thesis. And that's why I put down R. A lot of people, R, relate. Don't just write, relate it. Relate it. You got to connect it. So when document 2, for example, the New Republic, let's use document 1. Document 1 is such an obvious example of the irreconcilables. You have to show how that shows the irreconcilable idea, conservative idea, to avoid foreign entanglements. Oh, some people didn't mention liberal or conservatives. You have to address that question. That's outside information. I'll quote. A lot of people have like scrawled GD, which almost looks like an SD. Some people just summarize. Weak. Basic statement. You didn't have some kind of why that connected all together. I mean, the big argument was about foreign entanglements, or Article 10, or isolationist versus internationalism. Oh, and documents. One more thing before I get to anything else. You have to cite your documents correctly. And I know, to me personally, that's just a minor little thing. But they have an expectation, especially on the AP exam, where you will cite the documents at the end of the sentence as you use it. And you will cite it with a doc A, doc B, doc C, whatever it might be, doc 1, at the end of that sentence, at the end of the sentence. And so you don't want to write down in document 1 at the beginning of the sentence. You write down William Bora said, and at the end you put doc 1. Now I agree, that's not a huge deal, that's something that's easy to work with. Boy, would I hate for you to get somebody who's grading your DBQ and a little bit irritated, and they see that and they say, the heck with them, and take points off, or something like that. And that's happened, I'm sure, because the graders tend to be human too. And outside of this classroom, there are people who make mistakes. So with that, now let's get to the documents very quickly. Oh, shoot. Like I do with the other computer. But saying that, I'm really going to hammer outside information. I'm always going to want more outside information. But some people did fantastic on that. But then, and the next one, even do better. So, at the Treaty of Versailles, or this, I'm sorry, the DBQ, you had to address Wilson and in the Senate, you had to address Wilson. I had a few people in this class write about this conservative party and liberal party. Are we written now? There is no conservative party. There is no liberal party in the United States. Those do not exist, at least as the major parties. That's a big mistake. I know what you're thinking. You're trying to find some way to say conservative faction, liberal faction. I know what you're saying. But somebody who doesn't might not be so sympathetic towards that. They might think that you mean there's a conservative party in the U.S. There is no conservative party in the U.S. There is no liberal party. They don't exist. So back to this. This DBQ was based on their beliefs. The documents laid out actually in such a way that a few of you did do the DBQ this way. But William Borah, he's irreconcilable. That's an irreconcilable, period. New Republic, that's the liberal view of diplomacy. That's liberal. So they want the League of Nations. Here's Article 10, so lay that out so you can use that any time, but that's a good thing to put in there. Here, cartoon, I showed this in class too, that's either the irreconcilables or the reservationists, and it shows that conservative fear of foreign entanglements. Becky's holding something that says, or she's getting married with foreign entanglements on her dress. Herbert Hoover, a reservationist. He is begging Wilson to change the treaty. Du Bois, a liberal, furious that Wilson won't compromise. Wilson won't compromise. We have to do it to protect the soldiers. And Lodge, the leader of the reservationists. It laid out the documents to have one paragraph on reservationists, one paragraph on irreconcilables, and one paragraph on Wilson, and he won't compromise. That's the way the document's laid out. I know you could do it in a different way, but that's the way that it was designed. And those are the things I mentioned them a lot in class, and in that reading I gave you really mentioned those. So you had to have this. That is important outside information gratification. If you don't have that, you already have a big hole. So that's the big area to take points on. And I did. I wish I didn't have to, but I did. And let me give another thing. Let's get back to where we at here. Outline. I had some really weird outlines that I have no idea what you were doing. And I know some of you might be thinking, oh, I know what I'm doing. I bet you didn't. I bet you did 3 seconds before class and wrote that up. And then there are a few of you that try to write your essay in the outline. And that's kind of garbage. Yeah, that doesn't do you any good when you come in and write this for the class. You know, yeah, maybe your essay will be fine, and I gave you the benefit of the doubt because I wasn't clear on that, but that's kind of garbage. But let me show you some. I took some samples from various students. I covered their names up so I'd be responsible. I guess I like this one so much I did it twice. But here are good examples of outlines. In fact, let's use this one. National brainstorm list, so you know there's good information here. Can't tell you how many people forgot information. If you don't have information, if you don't relate documents to facts, if you don't have your own outside information, and if you don't have good context, background material, you will not do well in the DB. That's about 22% of your AP score. If you have that information, you do well. But nice body, boom, boom, boom. Documents relate to facts. Know exactly where they're going. I looked at this and okay, I'm going to get a pretty good essay. Okay, I know you got to do the job, finish the job, and everything. That's pretty good. In fact, that's really good. Notice my GD. Does that kind of look like an essay? It kind of does, doesn't it? Here, no brainstorm list, but another very organized, concise thesis. Boom, 3. Open to a little bit of repetition, but still. Lodge, we have Doc 2 with related to facts. Let me give you one more quick one. Brainstorm list, good thesis. Got the league, article based with Doc 3, documents to facts, well organized. And you'll notice too just a few words. If you got 3 minutes to write an outline, be as concise as possible. It's for you. Hopefully you know your own shorthand. I know. If you make abbreviations and don't know what you're abbreviating, work on that. Here's another one. This one a little bit too wordy, but still nice. A lot of good brainstorm list. 1, 2, 3. Topics. Topics are in the thesis. Well done. Here's the one I did before class. Scroll. Can you read my writing? Got all the facts down here. Wilson had a stroke. I wrote down stroke. I didn't use it in the essay, but something I could have used. My thesis, irreconcilable opposite. Oh, yeah, there we go. Despite intense conservative, irreconcilable opposition, there was enough liberal support to ratify the Treaty of Versailles with reservations, if not for President Wilson's stubbornness on other things. So I addressed the main elements of the statement. I took a very powerful stand on it by saying it was Wilson's stubbornness. So I did not totally agree, even though I did address the opposition. I addressed that. So that's my thesis. And irreconcilable, irreconcilable. Reservationist, reservationist. Wilson, Wilson. 1, the conservative philosophy, Article 10, Document 4, Article 10, Lodge in Document 8, and so on. Here's another one. This might be hard to read. The Senate failed to ratify the Treaty of Versailles due to a fear of additional foreign entanglements. This was hitting the opposition of the irreconcilables, the reservation that started to modify and Wilson's stubbornness to change. I did that like as quick as I could write. It's a little awkward, but I want to make sure I just had another example. If you're not organized, you're really going to struggle. And get the facts out. Oh, you notice HAP. That's where I put down HAP. And let me show you one example of HAP. Please work. I don't ask much in life. Work. Oh, I was looking at the World War II stuff. I'm going to go over here for a sec. I thought I moved this over. Here's a quick paragraph one. By the way, am I the only person who uses these? I cannot type now without having the space marks in there. I have no idea how I started that. And every time I show it up, there are people just like, God, how do you read that? It looks like making now. So a couple things about here, but let's get to how document 2. What liberals most encouraged was Wilson's call for the League of Nations that would solve problems between nations before it turns into war. So that shows the liberal point of view on from document 2. But then here's my hack. My hack. The New Republic wanted to ratify the treaty because it was a liberal magazine that wanted to emphasize diplomacy in the post-war world. That's who the New Republic was. The New Republic wanted to ratify the treaty because they were a liberal magazine. That's all happens. Simply did really good on that, but I want to show you one more example. Now, I'm going to give you a chance over spring break to do an extra credit one from, I'm going to pick out one from the review book to do. Just do the brainstorm outline pieces. And there's going to be homework over spring break. I told you this before. We have to be done by May 6th. And that means it's going over spring break, and we're going to have to go really fast. Yes.
That extra credit, PPQ, that's going to go on for.
If I can get it by Monday, I'm not going to put up for it.
But
yeah.
Oh, okay.
If I can get it. So I don't think we have to have our grades in after spring break till like Wednesday.
Okay.
So I'm not going to do it. If I don't have time, I will. But I'll still give you the extra time.
Okay.
And don't forget, we all want to get, but it's beyond the semester. And there's got to be homework for sure. And you're going to do a little outline of World War II and some maps. And might watch a video, might not, I haven't decided yet. But, and I'll give you do you want a movie to watch for extra credit over spring break? Yeah. Okay, I got an assignment, I'll get that. Don't let me forget. I promise I'll do it, but I might just forget to copy. I'll post it and I'll get that in there. If you're going to be gone in advance, I'll give you the copies, but I will post it on Teams. I'll try to do it after school today for the assignment. I'll try to get everything in. Now, then after the test, though, we'll clean up any loose ends. Heck, we'll take our semester final like the second week or third week of May. So if everything goes right, you won't have to come here for finals. It's the minor ones. And that'll be a relief for all of us. No. But that'll be nice, right? So then after that, it'll be nothing but fitness. Wall sits and bar hangs. Just every day, alternate. On bars, you hang for the period. You want a wall sit? Okay, well, wall sit. And the thing about wall sits, no shoes. It has to be socks. Because I want a degree of difficulty. Did anyone have a sadistic teacher that made you do wall sits for like 30 minutes? Yeah, a PE teacher. Mr. Harrison Chuck. It's amazing how I remember. That's a name you will never forget, Mr. Harrison Chuck. All right. So if there's a couple of you that really just don't get the DBQ at all, please set up time and I'll talk to you about that. If those of you just realize I didn't put out that. I didn't have that stuff, I should have that stuff. You'll get it. Most of you though, I didn't see like, oh, for the most part I thought you got documents. I thought they got that stuff. It was just the other stuff you have to add to it. Assume when you're doing the DBQ that the person reading it knows every little detail about the documents. They just know nothing else. So you have to show them how the document is related. But they know that stuff. You don't need to describe the document. They know that. Act like they know nothing else. All right. Oh, and if you can't read my writing, I know. I walk around. I hate sitting for too long. I have a compressed vertebra in my back, too. Don't do that. So I can only sit for limited amounts of time, and that's what's getting more painful. Let's go ahead and finish up the 20s. By the way, when I said irreconcilable reservationists and loyal Democrats, and you didn't put it in the essay, how many people thought, I knew that and didn't do it? But they feel like, I should do that. How many people were just so worried about the documents they forgot the other stuff? That's the problem with the DBQ, and I completely sympathize. I really do. Always think about relating the documents to facts. Stuff that you know outside of the document. By the way, anybody have a battery for a pickle? It's gone.
So does the battery operate pickle as well?
It's got to be pickle related. See, this one works fine. Okay, so. Oh, and then the tiger, the battery's dead. It used to roar. Well, normally, but I don't even know where to put the tiger back. They don't make tigers. It never ends. By the way, this was bought in the Edinburgh airport. So it's very stylish. All right, so we got the Coolidge, we got Hoover, right? We got through this, right?
We got the 1928 election.
Oh, we didn't get to this. Yay, we're here, right? Do we listen to Al Smith? One more time. Yeah. I think of plus. This would be the only voice I would do if it was. And you're at it. By the way, that's a good lesson for don't smoke. Oh yeah, they all smoked then. So with that, did I show you this map? This was a blowout. Hoover won big. The great engineer was as president, and he would leave as one of the most unpopular presidents in history. We're not there yet. And by the way, this button would become very ironic. So let's talk about the economy after this, though. And we got to talk a little bit about economic policy. So first, before we get to that, we got to talk a little bit about Henry Ford. Because Henry Ford would personify the 20s economy and technology. But to talk about Henry Ford, we actually have to go back to before World War I. So Ford was, okay, he did not invent the assembly line, but he was taking these ideas. But one idea that was huge, he predicted the consumer economy, where the economy was based upon average people, I mean like us, buying stuff. And what he did was, he gave them higher wages, $5 a day. Don't read too much about what $5 a day is then. It's still pretty low, but it's about $110 today a day, which is still not very much. But don't read too much about it because people spend money on different things. So it's really hard to save money from now. It's really hard to compare. But they would buy cars. He predicted this. You pay them a little bit more, they'll become incredibly loyal. They will work hard and then buy cars. And what kind of cars? They'll buy Ford. And he predicted this. Consumers with money will be the basis of the new economy that's developing before, but then would explode after World War II. Now, he never really understood it. He just did it instinctually. Because by the 1920s and 30s, he did everything he can to cut workers' wages. Because he wanted the money. But he just understood, just had this like innate, it's like an instinct. It's like I always think like a carnivore on the hunt. He understood that. But how do you do this then? If we're going to produce as many cars as possible to make money, standardization, the assembly line. You can buy a Ford any color you want as long as it's what? Black. So, black, yes. So only one color. Now, eventually, that'd be the big thing that, well, he would, I jumped the gun there. So standardization, produce as many as possible. And what happens when you produce more? You get workers who become very efficient. They know how to do their one job, so that you division of labor, they just keep putting one wheel and turn one bolt. Yes, it's hard, backbreaking, boring work, but you can go really fast. And this is the definition of economies of scale. You would get big, produce more, and what happens when you produce more? What were you? Can you see better? Okay. Productivity all through the 1920s would go up by 43% when everybody started copying Ford's idea. Now, productivity is the amount of goods per 1 hour of work or 1 day of work. And so basically what happened is one worker was producing 43% more. They're not working hard, harder or less hard. I mean, people are people. Some work hard, some don't. But the point is, because of machines, because of standardization, and because of economies of scale, individual workers are producing more. By the way, if they produce more, who gets more money? Ford. Yeah, Ford. Because don't forget, capitalism encourages this kind of innovation, but at the same time focuses wealth to the people who have the capital. Unless you change the rules. And as you can shut that door. I'm just looking outside the door. So with that, costs drop as production goes up. And everybody else had to adopt this or go out of business. That's why a massive company named General Motors would be created. All these other little smaller companies couldn't compete with Ford standardization, so they formed one big conglomerate. And they started come up with a way to produce, to paint cars with lower costs. And they drove the Model T out. Ford would have to retool and make, I think, one of the greatest cars ever, the Model A. If you've ever seen a Model A, you know what I'm talking about. They are the coolest cars. And if you have not seen a Model A, act like you have. They're pretty cool, aren't they? They're good. So at that. And so, by the end of the decade, Ford was putting out a car every 93 seconds. And he could charge only $269 a car. That means regular working people can afford to buy this. No, about 12,000 in today's dollars, but once again, it's a lot different. So you can't really just do a direct one-on-one ratio. People do all the time, but it's just not. It doesn't work very well. But to give you an idea how this has changed, by the end of the decade, all the car companies, becoming very efficient, sold 5 million cars. And think about what this does to the economy. You have an entire economy then based upon cars. I have a bad feeling somebody just sent me a message saying this hasn't been recorded or something. So let me see. Oh, good. Okay. And so with that, 5 million a year. But here's the thing. What if you don't sell cars? What would that do to the whole economy? Think about us for a second what goes into making a car. And more production and value and jobs and everything comes from making cars. What do you need to make a car? What do you need to make that? Lots of steel, right? And you need high quality steel. It's got to be light enough so it doesn't wear down the car and take too much gas mileage. Very precise engineering to make an internal combustion engine. What else do you need? Lots of workers, rubber to make the wheels, a whole entire infrastructure for petroleum. To take petroleum, one of the byproducts are seen as actually as really a dangerous byproduct, petrol. Now I can call it gasoline. You need, but you can't then even if you have a refinery making gasoline, an entire infrastructure, then what do you need? Gas stations, don't you? And an entire infrastructure to get that to market. And you got to have the gas stations next to what else do you need? What's that? You actually do. That's another one. By the way, who mentioned rubber? Think about all you need to make rubber. An entire infrastructure, and forward by massive parts of Brazil called Fordlandia in Brazil for rubber production. And places like Congo or French Indochina have become really important for rubber production. You might have heard of French Indochina. Today it's 3 countries, Cambodia, Laos, and a place called Vietnam. You might get involved in that down the road. Rubber, car washes. Now you have a car. Oh, you need wood, you need electronics, you need copper, you need spark plugs. You get the point here. Glass. Glass that won't shatter in the driver's face if it hits a rock. I mean, little things like that, very important infrastructure. What else do you need? Now you have a car. You need people to drive it. You need a thing to actually teach people to drive. Mechanics to fix it. Auto shops. Roads. You got to make all these roads. You can't just simply say, "Hey, I'll make a road," and you get a bulldozer and plow a path. You need an entire infrastructure to build a road. You need engineers. Are you starting to get the point about what you need for cars? Police, laws. I mean, everything will change. Traffic lights. All these things you don't think about all had to be built. But if you quit buying cars, what does that do to the economy? It ripples to every part. Heck, you have people driving on the road, they get hungry, so you need a place for them to eat, right? They get driving, they get too tired to drive anymore. You need what? Huh? Okay. Very good. I like that. It wasn't what I was expecting. You need a hotel for motorists. A motel. Motor hotel, motel. You need all of those things. And if you can't buy cars, oof. So, but what of the workers? In the 1920s, there was a feeling of prosperity throughout this decade, but the prosperity was incredibly uneven. Unions were destroyed. The unions weren't very powerful anyway. Unions were small. But unions raised wages. They raised wages. Now that's a cost. Lots of reasons. Obviously, going to control the workplace. But not only that, there's technological unemployment. Machines were taking jobs. These new technical machines. I mean, there's still jobs, but skilled workers were being replaced by machines. And therefore, you have this large pool of workers that their skill is no longer in value. So they're what we call unskilled. If you have this large pool of unskilled workers competing for a job, what does that do to everybody's wages? It drops them. Throughout the entire decades, wages was lower. We saw elements of that in the 1990s. Not so much today. People talk about it today, but productivity is really, really low now. So we just don't see that. So for 93% of workers, to the bottom 93%, their wages actually dropped in the decade. If you did that today, though, For the bottom 90% of wages, wages have been stagnant or dropping in the United States since 1980. There's been a few blips, but they have been, for most workers, they've been stagnant, including ones with college degrees. And people always say, oh, got to go to college to get higher wages. Well, yeah, you might get higher wages because there's fewer college people with diplomas, but their wages are stagnant too, just like people without college degrees.
College prices are also going up.
Thankfully, debt's going up, college debt, and so that makes up the difference. That's me being facetious. And 50% of the people in poverty, the poverty wage at 1929 was $750 a month. But nobody was hurt worse than the massive number of farmers. The median farmer's income, and that includes sharecroppers, was $273 a year. And compare that to the poverty rate. There was a crisis on the farms. And so this shows wages and salaries as part of personal income, total income. And wages, when at the beginning of the decade, were about 60% of all income. They dropped down to less than 40%. Now you might think, what's the rest of personal income? Money from speculation, like stocks and bonds. And by definition, who buys stocks and bonds? Yeah, you have to have extra money to buy stock and bonds. You have to have additional money to speculate. Because if you speculate with what little money, if you're working class and speculate with your money, not only you can't afford your losses, but you won't be able to eat. So that's just what, by definition, the people who speculate have got to have money. Or they're crazy. I know people like that. So, yet, we have this consumer economy that's developing. Companies are producing more than ever before, and they have to sell. And workers have to become consumers. But as I told you before, wages weren't keeping up. So how do people buy stuff if they don't have money? Here's cars on credit. In fact, the big corporations, they make so much money selling things on credit. So much money. They want you to take a loan out because they charge interest. So this right here is the ratio of debt to the size of the economy, the GDP. Don't worry too much about what the numbers mean. What it meant is that debt went up dramatically. Actually, there was more consumer debt by the end of the decade than the consumer debt was actually bigger than the size of the entire economy in 1929. People owed more money than the economy. And what happens is, if wages are stagnant and they borrow money, eventually there'll have to come a time when they can't borrow any more money. And if they can't borrow any more money, they quit buying. And one more thing that's happening in the 1920s. Oh, it doesn't mean debt is bad. Debt could be good. Debt could be bad. The point is, if you should be very reluctant to borrow money if you don't know what tomorrow is going to be. And the inequality of wealth skyrocketed, partially because of growth of monopolies. This blue line are all the mergers according to the Federal Trade Commission. And what we have, by 1929, 200 corporations had half of all business, as in terms of money, financial value. Just 200 corporations. That means we have monopolies or oligopolies taking power. And by the way, monopolies lower wages. So wealth is focusing. And this would help trigger a bull market. People were taking their money they got from this and investing in the stock market. It fueled speculation. If there's a bunch of companies buying each other out, I mean, if you hear that one company is going to be bought out, I'm going to sell out of Partridge Inc. tomorrow. This company's going to buy me out. What's going to happen to the value of my stock today? And people think tomorrow I'm going to be bought out. It'll go up. Why will it go up? Because people know if I buy it today, someone's going to pay more for it tomorrow. It's going to be bought out. This fueled massive speculation. The entire economic policy of that time was to put money in the hands of the wealthy. Yet much of the money of the wealthy went towards speculation. Yeah.
For that first 1929 figure, how many corporations do you think are like half of all business today? 10, maybe 20?
It's less. It'd be less than 30. Yeah. It's hard to say, but like for like the big ones like the banks, there's basically 5 banks that have about 80% of all financial instruments. So that alone. So wealth is really concentrated, much more even than that. So the richest 1% out of about 51% of the wealth. Don't forget, it's really hard to measure wealth. Because, how do you measure wealth? I mean, yeah, piles of cash, we can count them. But how much is a house worth? Real estate goes up and down. Or let's say you take that wealth to buy fine art. Like, how much is my picture of Tobias Fouquet in a blue thing? I mean, the value is immeasurable, isn't it? You can't measure how valuable that is. To me, it's priceless. How about my picture of Danny DeVito? You can't measure that. So, what we have, though, is this was not accidental. This was policy, and it's called trickle-down economics. Today it's called supply side, and it is the essence of conservative economics. And this should be familiar. This sounds like Hamiltonian economics, laissez-faire economics, but as we get to the 20th century, there is a more understanding of how to use government to focus money to the wealthy. But once again, this is the wealth of the top one. This is all the 1%. This is what the 0.1% and so on. But this is the massive, or the inequalities here. Now, you could say this is good or bad. That's a different argument, but that was certainly the policy choice. And so with that, please click. Andrew Mellon will personify this. Andrew Mellon was the Treasury Secretary for all 3 Republican presidents of the 1920s. He was from an incredibly wealthy family. They made their money at first on coal, then oil in western Pennsylvania. So the Mellon, he was one of the richest men in the world. And so he had a huge impact directly on the economy. And his whole idea was, we'll let the market sort it out. Those on top are supposed to be on top because the market is this natural entity that spits out the weaker and the strongest survive. By definition, what philosophy is this? The definition, yeah, he's very social Darwinistic. He inherited most of his money, he was rich because of inheritance, but he believed, in fact, said this very clear, he said this, that he did it because of, he was superior breeding. He was destined, it was natural for him to be this rich. And people say this today, a lot. Our former president said that many times. So his whole goal was to funnel money, did I say monthly? To put money into the hands of the wealthy. And they will invest. They will invest in business, in stocks. The whole idea is the rich are rich because they're smarter. They know what to do with the money. Why would you ever give money to somebody who lives in a cardboard box by the river? They could never invest that money. You give it to somebody who's rich because they know how to make money. Which, by the way, is pretty social Darwinistic. But still, some people might think, you might, I don't necessarily agree with this, but, well, yeah, they're rich, so they must be smarter. I've met dumb rich people, too. So. And Henry Ford was kind of clueless, but you know how to make money. So they will invest. How do we do it? The biggest element of this is going to be tax cuts. Massive tax cuts. The highest marginal income tax rate, okay, 2 big tax cuts in 21 and 26. Mellon wrote the law. He wrote the law, but then it has to be proposed in the House of Representatives. And by 26, the highest marginal income tax rate went from 73% on the very, 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 very wealthy. So the top 1%, it went from 73% to 25%. And that is a massive tax cut, with the whole goal to funnel money to the hands of the wealthy so then they'll invest it in business. But as I told you before, do they always invest in business? It's really hard to start a business. But speculating in the stock market, you buy a stock and just hope the value goes up, that's easier. And it's kind of a gamble, so it's kind of fun, especially if you have a lot of money. For example, Mellon himself at 26 wrote a bill that gave him an $800,000 tax cut. Now he was worth hundreds of millions of dollars even then. So $800,000? By the way, if he had an $800,000 tax cut, how much stock could he buy using margin rules? Yeah, $8 million. And when the stock market's going up like it was, a lot of people did that. So with that, don't worry about that. We're jumping right to, let's get to the engine of trickle-down economics. Oh, I did tell you there'd be a very easy little take-home test. Remember I told you that? I originally had 50 multiple choice, 1 short ID, and 1 short answer question. But first period complained so much, now there's 20 short answer questions. Just 50 multiple choice. I just want to have something on World 1 to 20 tied together. It's going to be very basic. It should drop at noon. Yeah, it's online. Just do it on Teams. I don't think it'll. My guess is you'll do really well on it. I want you to do well. I want everyone to get 100%. Please get 100%, especially if you didn't do as well as you could do as you thought you should. Get 100%. Yeah, Thursday. I might give you more again. Should I give you one more day? Who just thinks you guys deserve one more day? No. So you're not my We'll leave it be. No, that's good. Don't kick it. Spiders are cool. Mosquitoes suck.
I guess I didn't really know.
Right. I understand I've been talking about it, never asked about it before here. So this is what you're going to do. You start it out. Right. You're going to look at it and see if you can't read it. Okay? Look at the document, read through it, see if you can do it outline. How about where were you today after school? Yesterday after school, you said you were going to be here around 2:15. I would think they could go. They couldn't fit my car. You got the wrong radio. Okay. So, like today now work? What's that? Is today now work? Well, it's going to be tied. What time are you done?
147.
Okay, get here at 147, okay? What is society until order?
I've never.
Don't pass.